Banks are crashing the global economy as we speak, but no one is talking about the final turning point, the moment that will mark this global financial crisis that sets us all on a collision course with disaster and that we are slowly creeping up on. Once we reach this point, there will be no turning back, everything will be set in stone, and we will just have to watch on in awe as everything falls apart. And yet you will not read a single publication from CNBC or Bloomberg alerting the world to this reality. The Financial Times and The Economist will remain oddly silent about this looming threat, and Fox News and CNBC will continue to ignore it as well. The truth is that they don't want you to pay attention to this, they don't want you to know what is actually coming, they want you to remain oblivious to it all as central banks and financial institutions are tearing the economy apart, preparing themselves for the chaos while hoping you remain totally uninformed. If you think enough is enough and you're tired of being lied to, then consider checking out Stoic Financial Freedom with the link down below. So what exactly is going on? Well, it starts of course with debt, but actually with the way that debt requirements are getting harder to meet, and banks all over the world are slowly but steadily removing the availability of debt to the average person in what can only be considered a coordinated ploy to protect themselves at the expense of everyone else. Yes, we all know interest rates have risen. I don't want to waste your time with obvious statements anyone could make, and we all know that the Fed is going to continue to hike rates despite what your favorite YouTube stock pickers who lost 50% of their portfolio last year will tell you. But the truth is that raising these interest rates at the source should be enough to slow down debt creation anyway. This is the Fed's chosen path to fight inflation, to reduce spending and investment, to get demand to weaken so prices stop rising. But why are banks taking things further? If the interest rate you're offered on a car loan rises from 5 to 10%, then maintaining the same requirements would already result in less debt creation. But banks aren't stopping there, they are actively making their requirements harder to meet, even impossible to meet in some circumstances. The 2023 Senior Loan Officer Opinion Survey is a quarterly release that monitors the changes in bank lending practices in order to find out how demand for debt and the supply of debt is changing. On this front, the survey is blindingly clear. Tighter standards have been imposed on ordinary everyday people and corporations too. Regarding loans to businesses, survey respondents on balance reported tighter standards and weaker demand for commercial and industrial loans to large middle market and small firms over the fourth quarter. Banks reported tighter standards and weaker demand for all commercial real estate loan categories. For loans to households, banks reported that lending standards tightened. In addition, banks reported tighter standards and weaker demand for home equity lines of credit. Standards tightened and demand weakened on balance for credit card, auto, and other consumer loans. The trend is blindingly obvious. Now, we should expect demand to be weakening for loans across the board because that is the express intention of raising interest rates, to reduce demand for debt to then reduce spending and investment in the economy. But why are individual private banks and financial institutions going out of their way to make that effect even more pronounced? Why are these banks going even further than the Federal Reserve? Why are they saying higher interest rates aren't enough? We're going to make it even harder for you to get a loan. And for those who maybe doubt the validity of this data and that survey, I'm afraid all other evidence says the exact same thing. This is the Mortgage Credit Availability Index over the last year in the United States, and as you can see, it has been dropping off a cliff, showing us that it has been getting far more difficult to get a mortgage in the US. This is data from the Federal Reserve showing that banks are across the board tightening their standards for credit card applicants, and this is on top of the increases in interest rates charged to these customers. Why is this such a problem? Why is it so disastrous that banks are taking it upon themselves to limit the availability of credit and debt? Well, it all boils down to the two things holding the global economy together right now. One is consumer savings, and we'll get onto that in a moment, but the other is debt. We all know we have a debt-based economy and that the easiest way to stimulate growth is to cut interest rates to zero and make it incredibly easy to acquire debts to finance spending and investment. And we all know that our economies are now literally addicted to this incredibly cheap debt, and without it, we just can't manage to grow at all. But it turns out that this debt creation isn't only essential for growth, but even stagnation. Without new debt being created, the problem isn't that we can't grow, the problem is that we can't even keep things going on as they already are. This debt creation is a drug that's been injected straight into our veins for the last 3 decades, and withdrawal symptoms won't just lead to a return to normal, a return to how things were in the 1980s, it will cause a complete total collapse of our economy as we know it today. Why is this the case? Well, you may have noticed, but the economy today is in a somewhat weird situation. Inflation has caused prices to rise by more than 20% over the last couple of years, but the average salary has not increased by nearly as much. As a result, the average person is just far poorer today than they were a few years ago, and yet consumer spending is remaining high and corporate earnings are remaining high too. People are spending more money despite not actually earning any more money, and the main reason for this is debt. People are simply taking out debt to finance their spending that they otherwise couldn't afford. This is what credit card debt across America looks like over the last year. It's been an absolute explosion of mega proportions, and this obviously can't continue forever. Firstly, because this debt will eventually just need paying back, and sooner rather than later too, because the interest burden on this debt is growing with each rate hike. But also because it's getting harder and harder to increase your credit limit or get a credit card at all, which means every day the number of Americans unable to finance their growing spending increases further. For now, credit cards, HELOC loans, even low bond yields have allowed American people and corporations to just ignore inflation and keep up with rising prices, but this will not last forever. And with everything going on in the economy, with asset prices falling and most investors losing money, the last thing we need at this point is some kind of cyber pandemic, as the World Economic Forum keeps insisting is on its way. You have no idea the amount of problems, phishing attacks and other scams I've had to deal with recently, as my grandmother seems to fall for one every single week, and she's literally lost thousands of dollars at this point. And that's where this video's sponsor Guardio comes in. Guardio will block any phishing attempts no matter the source of it, email, Google or social media. If you think using corporate software is keeping you safe, Guardio blocks 100 times more harmful sites and detects these before Google and competitors. By the time these sites get blocked by Google, the scam site will be replaced by a new one, which once again Guardio will be the first to detect. If something does go wrong, Guardio will help keep you safe and tell you if your information is at risk. Their identity monitoring is cross-platform, so if you sign up through your mobile, you'll get real-time alerts if your data gets breached, so you can take action immediately. Once installing Guardio, you'll get a free security scan that shows you the threats that are already on your browser, and you'll be surprised with what it finds, and you'll also get 7 days free trial to remove them and enable real-time protection. Guardio is trusted by over 1 million users to help keep them safe, and you can get it now and protect yourself and your family, because one Guardio account covers 5 family members. That helps to keep your parents, sister, brother or your friends safe from hackers and scammers. They're currently offering our community a 20% off their monthly subscription, so if you want a clean and secure browsing experience, go to guard.io/stoicfinance, link in the description, and check out their affordable premium plan for full protection. So we know debt is keeping the economy ticking over, but it's only a matter of time until that has to stop. But how are consumer savings related to this? Well, over the COVID pandemic, consumer savings exploded thanks to the government literally sending cash out to millions of people, at the same time as they made it nigh on impossible to actually spend that cash. People went from saving roughly 8% of their disposable income before the pandemic to over 30% at its peak, and saving rates stayed elevated for about 2 years in the end. 2 years of people saving far more than usual, stacking that cash up over the pandemic as it ravaged the economy. But over the last year, that dynamic has changed. The personal savings rate has dropped drastically to lows not seen for 40 years, and Americans have gone from having a collective sum of $4.8 trillion saved at its highest to just $600 billion at its lowest. That's a drop of over 90% and over $4 trillion when taking into account inflation, and the reason this has happened is simple. Inflation is high, prices have risen, but people haven't been spending any less. They haven't adjusted their quality of life to the fact that they are now poorer. They have simply been spending their savings instead of their incomes, and this is in conjunction with the monstrous rise in debt that the economy has seen so far that's allowed it to survive. But this too exists merely on borrowed time. Savings do not last forever, and as they get lower, consumers get more and more worried. They spend less, and eventually this will all ripple through the economy and start to impact everything. This is the tipping point. This will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, when debt levels can increase no more, when no one can get a credit card anymore, and when personal savings are all but dried up. That will be the moment everything changes and the economy comes crashing down, and it's being driven not really by central banks and their rate hikes, but by financial banks, institutions and credit unions shutting their doors and protecting themselves at the expense of everyone else. What will it actually look like when this all happens? First, consumer spending will drop off a cliff. Some will try to claim this won't be a big deal, but it will be. As people spend less money, companies will earn less money, and their quarterly reports will start to go sour. power. Investors will want to reprice these assets. Those who were happy to pay $100 a share when that company was making $5 in earnings are suddenly going to be unhappy when the company's earnings drop to half that, and so the share price will fall too. Michael Burry himself in particular is watching out for this, alerting us all to the earnings compression that will come when the recession starts off. Everything will seem to change almost overnight, from a recession that never really felt like a recession to a depression that feels like the end of the world. Employees will lose their jobs, families will lose their homes, and entrepreneurs will lose their businesses. The Federal Reserve and the government will try to come to the rescue. They will print more money than you thought even possible, and for a while it will seem like they did it, like they saved us all, but inflation will follow and it won't drop back down. When you hear someone tell you how economists expect inflation to level off, just look at this graph here, which shows just how wildly wrong these people have been before and why you don't want to pay attention to them today. Pay attention to the data, to the facts, to the evidence. Forget what you want to happen and focus on what will actually happen. Focus on protecting yourself and your investments. If you're worried about keeping yourself safe online from phishing attacks or scams, then make sure to check out Guardio with the link down below in the description. If you're worried about your investments during this financial crisis, then check out Stoic Financial Freedom. Or if you just want to know more about this debt bubble and why it could be the next black swan collapse, then watch this video here.